Back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. Our guest is new Metro Vice Mayor Jim Shulman. Been on the job now, how long? What, 3 weeks?
3.5 weeks.
3.5 weeks.
Right.
And appreciate him coming on, just giving us his insight and what his view is of the city moving forward, and trying to answer some of your calls. And next up is another individual that's very involved in the community here, and that would be Ann. Good morning to you, Ann.
Good morning.
Hi.
First, two things. Mr. Shulman participated in something that's very near and dear to many of us in East Nashville, and he participated at Holy Name honoring Reverend or Charles Strobel, as he's known to many throughout this city. And I'd like to thank him for his participation 2 weekends ago. It was something very special and dear to us, and thank you very much.
Sure.
The other thing is, I recently found out that Lebanon had the equivalent of a community oversight board, and when I made a call there, was quite shocked that the mayor answered his phone on the second ring and had a lengthy conversation with me, and then put me in contact with the chief of police, who also answered his own phone on couple of rings, and then had another conversation with me, and then proceeded to give me the names of the people that had been involved for 10 years plus. So community oversight now, or the soon-to-be last election that concerns citizens here, I've recently found out about this board. I don't know if you know about this board, Mr. Shulman, but please contact Lebanon.
Okay.
They've covered a lot of these issues, and they have a lot of information, and they do answer their phones. They do immediately have open dialogue and transparency.
I think that's a great point that she brings up. You said, in terms of this oversight board that is going to go to a referendum in the election, you support it.
Yeah, I supported it. I signed the petition.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. I think we should have done this already, but it was hard to get the parties together. People didn't want to talk about it. I think it's important for the city to have this. The idea was really, we had tried several times to get everybody to talk about it. There was a resolution that came to the council that was defeated, because we really wanted everybody to come to the table and say, okay, we've got these situations going on in the city. There is tension in the city. I mean, I just spent 3 months going all over the place. And there is an underlying tension. I mean, people talk about it. You go to church services, people talk about it there. So,
well, the flashpoints are the officer-involved shootings.
That's right. And so I feel it. I feel it's out there. And when you have a problem, instead of kicking it down the road or not dealing with it, it's time to deal with it. And one of the ways to deal with this, to try to alleviate some of that tension, is to bring the parties together and say, okay, if this is one way to start taking a look at these situations, misconduct or whatever, then let's do it. Let's talk. And big cities, I mean, Lebanon has one. There are cities all over the country that have them. I think the idea is to sit down and come up with one.
Because now, there are other apparatus in place to do and look at this already, but your idea is bringing it in and having a group of citizens. It takes it to a different level than the post review and internal review and the TBI and the DA's office. You just think having citizens, it gives them more of a hand in what happens?
Well, so I'm a big believer in the police as well. I mean, you can believe in the police and support the police, but this is just a process. So it's like, having taking the internal review of misconduct from within an agency and just having a board outside that just checks and is a kind of an extra oversight wing of making sure that everything is operating right. I mean, we see it. I mean, it's this whole year there have been discussions, and it started last year as well, about these concerns, and I just don't think you can ignore it anymore. And again, I really wish all the parties, I know people tried to get people to come together to come up with something that people could live with.
Well, it's interesting what you see happening here in the city that you haven't seen in some others, maybe a few others, but with regard to the officer-involved shootings, we know now that General Funk has brought charges against the officer in the Hambrick case, and now a lot of people are expecting, okay, there's the charge. Well, that just means it's going to the grand jury now. And I'm telling you right now, my take, it's 50-50 the grand jury indicts him. Now, if they do indict him, then we're potentially looking at a trial.
Right.
Which, I don't know. I mean, I think what's been good so far in the city, it seems like, would you agree that they try to be pretty darn transparent? There can be debates over whether or not certain videos were released too early or not. What do you think in the way, I think Nashville in some ways, you're right about the tension, is a little ahead of some other cities in that they're trying, from the chief to the DA to other leaders, to be transparent.
I think everybody's trying. Okay. Everybody's trying very hard to be transparent, to keep the situation at a manageable level. You know, there was that period of time in this country where there were mass riots in other cities and people, things being burned down and things like that. It's like, and people, I'd go up to Nashville, and people would go, no, Nashville's not like that. We, you know, we would never do that. And let's hope we don't ever do that. The way we don't do it is that we talk to each other. We keep good lines of communication, keep things transparent, let people do their jobs. But put in place anything that people feel more comfortable with in terms of making sure that all this stuff works. We want people to love Nashville, and we want Nashvillians to love each other. And so we need to be above all the, you know, we need to address that tension that's underlying any problems that are underlying. We need to work together, come up with solutions, and do something. I just, you know, as I said during the campaign, I'm too old to kick these things down the road, because I kick them down too much further, I'm not going to be around anymore. So at least while I'm in this office, if it's 8 months or if it's 4 years or whatever it is, I'm just not willing to sit back anymore.
You believe the referendum will pass? I'm just, you get a sense of that?
So, you know, I was listening to what Ann was saying, and they were, obviously there's discussions about it. This is a big ballot that's coming up in November. We have, you know, a Senate race and a governor's race.
Turnout's going to be up.
The council put 5 things on the ballot, you know, little things to change in the charter, and then you've got this. And the question is, will people, when they walk in to vote, particularly because they're voting for probably one of the bigger elections, what will they do with 6 charter amendments that they, well, the hope is that they read them before they come in. But if they haven't, that's a lot of reading to do. Do they just not vote? Do they vote yes? Do they vote no? You know, I don't know at this point. But I really encourage people to look at this stuff before they go in and vote.
Absolutely. All right, let's go next to, I believe, Wayne. Good morning, Wayne. Hi there, Wayne.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, the question I have is Metro Codes. Who actually regulates that department? The reason I'm asking, I live near the Laughlin Springs subdivision, which we have a neighborhood association, but with all the new growth that we have, it seems like Metro Codes is riding around their patrol cars, writing citations for ridiculous things like too much trash in your trash can, and your storage shed made of aluminum needs to be painted. And one thing I don't know if you know about, if the house in Laughlin Springs is built before 1937, you can't replace it, you have to restore it. And if it's built after 1937, you can restore it, but it has to be modular. So I'm just wondering who comes up with these ideas and who regulates it.
Okay.
Well, Wayne, that's a good question. I didn't particularly know about the Laughlin Springs and the 1937 deal. Those depends on exactly how that area was developed. There was a subdivision plat or whatever. If there's not, then it may be something that the council passed, or because it's 1937, that would have been before metropolitan government. So I don't know how far that thing goes back. In terms of who regulates codes, the mayor, it's a department within metro government, so the mayor would oversee it. The council provides the money for it. So we all have responsibilities in it. Bill Herbert is the new director of codes, great guy. And I had a conversation with him about 2 weeks ago, and they are, this is not necessarily a good excuse, and he would say it's not a good excuse either, but it's like they are working very, very hard to get the major stuff done. Now, the thing with the aluminum siding and the trash being too much trash in the cart. Those are little things, and I know people put those things in. Eventually, they may see him or say something, but I think Wayne is right. I mean, I think at some point we have to worry about the big stuff.
Right.
There's a lot of issues going on, whether it's short-term rental property or whatever, in terms of regulations and in terms of all this stuff going on. There was a major traffic crisis over the weekend downtown.
What was that? Thank goodness. I think there's a traffic crisis every weekend downtown.
Well, so you got 18 things going on downtown, and roads got blocked and people couldn't get out of downtown.
Right.
And so, the question is, whose responsibility was that? So, more power to Wayne. I mean, this is something that we have to deal with. I'm
glad you mentioned. Again, now look, in terms of the Nashville city being, everyone wants to react instead of being proactive.
Yeah.
I don't live in Davidson County, but I have to tell you, I was in favor of the transit plan. I know it was a ton of money, and people are saying that's way too much, and maybe there's a way to dial it down. But doing nothing ain't the ticket, Jim. That's stupid. Doing nothing. And they're going to say they're going to do other things. We're going to upgrade the buses. We'll put some other. Ain't going to cut it. It's bad. That's the reason I don't want to come downtown on the weekends. All right, I'm not a FUD. There's some cool stuff going down here.
Yeah.
But that traffic, the headache, and the parking, that's for the birds. Now, if there was a great transit system, heck, I'd come down here in a heartbeat. But otherwise, ain't worth my blood pressure. It just isn't. And more people are going to start feeling that way.
I'm going to put this down as another call. And then I'm going to respond to you.
Pop it down there. Hey, look, I know there was a large number of people that didn't like the expense of it, and that's fine. You're going to pay the piper. You can do it now or later.
Well, I think, and the council put the thing on the ballot. I ended up voting against it, and I was honest to admit it. That's where
because I think most people.
Well, obviously,
like
65% of the people voted against it.
Exactly.
What I would say is that, again, listening for. At that point, it had been 3 years out there running around the city, just being a council member at large. What we heard when we were running 3 years ago was this traffic is a mess and it's going to get worse. What are we going to do to fix the concerns? And so then you really have to put everybody's, I know we had lots of meetings, but in the end, when you come up with a plan, I think the thing that was missing was you come up with a plan and then you go back out to the public and say, okay, this is what we heard. Does this plan address your concerns? One way to do it is through a big giant referendum, which is what happened. The other way to do it is before you have the referendum, you go back out with the plan, you have meetings and go, what do you think? And people go, that's not what we asked for.
What can we adjust it? Because really, the biggest gripe to me, at least what I seem to hear, is they couldn't stomach the price tag. Meaning some of the ideas in there were great, but it was just going to cost too much. I think that's what scared people off most of all.
Okay, well, so I heard that. I also heard when the initial thing was announced, I know that the legislation that was passed in the state doesn't allow for us to kind of do it as a regional, kind of a whole over regional, but it's going to be a regional plan because you can't just have it for Davidson County. You got to have it for the outside counties as well.
I thought I would have benefited from it. I love the idea.
So I think what I would have done is when you announce it, you have all the county mayors around, everybody's on board, and say.
And maybe have them feel some of the pain of the cost and pitch in.
So, but again, before you ever get to that point, you go back out with the plan that's devised and go, did this hit what everybody was talking about? And if people say, you know what, how is Murfreesboro? How are they going to come up I-24 and utilize this system? And and then you have to go out and say, okay, so we're going to build park and rides. Are people really going to come up from Murfreesboro, fight the traffic, and then pull over to a parking ride, and then take a bus in?
Right.
You need to find that out before you just undo it. So the idea is, I know people were upset by it. Obviously, it went down. You start again. You learn from what happened. People obviously weren't comfortable with it. But we have traffic problems.
Well, so the bottom line on that as we go to break is that you're right. So you start again. We're on the clock, and every single year it gets more expensive.
Right.
It's just, so you're on the clock. Eventually, when you come up with a plan everyone likes, it's going to be exponentially more expensive than it would have been just now. So the longer we wait, it's just getting more expensive, and the traffic keeps getting worse. So you're going to pay one way or the other, and you're going to pay more.
I'm going to write down all your comments.
We'll take a break. When we come back, more of your calls. I guess I have an opinion on that right after this.
That's fine.